I'm going to make a statement here that may sound crazy, but stay with me, alright? Without the game Adventure on the Atari 2600, we wouldn't have Bloodborne on the PlayStation 4. No, I said stay with me! Where are you going? No, you want a copy of Adventure? I don't even have an Atari. I can't use it. Bloodborne is a game that depends on the community of players that From Software has nurtured throughout its Souls series, beginning in 2009 with Demon Souls, then through Dark Souls 1 and 2, and continuing into Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3. Now I'm going to focus on Bloodborne simply because I'm more familiar with the game, but many of the concepts that I'm going to talk about are applicable across the From Software universe. Now, plenty of games encourage a community where players swap discovered lore so that they can collectively stitch together the story elements into a cohesive narrative. Casual mentions of weapon origins and asides by non-playable characters coalesce into something remarkable, something fans feel invested in. Fallout 4, in addition to Bloodborne, is a recent example where each NPC and side character has their own backstory, and learning this backstory can often enhance the gaming experience, sometimes superficially, and sometimes even changing the game mechanics slightly.
You can't seriously want to kill all the synths.
We most certainly do, but we have to find them first.
Some games even incorporate offline resources to round out the experience. Halo has an entire canonical novel series. But with these examples, the community is helping to curate an enhanced experience. This curation isn't actually required for the experience. Bloodborne, I argue, does require this conversation. Bloodborne creator Hidetaka Miyazaki goes so far as to state this ambiguous storytelling style is not only purposeful, but comes from a very specific time in his childhood when he would read books that were well above his reading level. Naturally, he could only understand half the story. What would happen is that my imagination would fill the other half. That's kind of the part I enjoyed as well, filling the gaps of where I didn't understand the readings, where my imagination took me eventually to think that I understood what I was reading. This idea that a developer would consciously restrict some story elements knowing the players would fill in the gaps seems pretty amazing to me. In a weird way, this lack of story harkens back to some of the first action games where the story was often condensed into a single title screen preamble. Only back then I'd blame software limitations for lackluster story. Or even developer indifference. John Carmack, lead programmer of the original Doom, famously said that story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important. That was in the early 90s, however, and my, how times have changed. Now story is all over our video games, and sadly lacking in porn. I assume. Back then, a singular, cohesive story might be absent because it wasn't seen as important. From Software, however, abandons this singular, cohesive story because they know the players will yearn for it. That's so weird to think about. So, the need for a community to curate a story is an intentional choice made by Miyazaki. It's not an example of poor game design. Okay, sure. But that's just the game's story being helped by the community, not the gameplay itself. So let's talk about gameplay and the primary purpose of this video. It's the dependence on the community to learn gameplay without much help from the developer that makes From Software such a daring company. Game manuals went away long ago in favor of less cumbersome in-game tutorials and sometimes those annoying, overly helpful prompts.
Looks like there are a few sand sharks up there on the plateau.
But Bloodborne takes this concept of streamlining the necessary gameplay foundation to insane levels. How insane? The foundation barely exists. Other than a few on-screen button prompts, learning the gameplay is left entirely up to the player, or should I say the community of players. You, as the Bloodborne player, are given very little context. Here's how you swing your weapon. Here's how you shoot your gun. But what's arcane mean? What's an attribute bonus special attack? Whose horse is this? Why is blood echoes? How many insights should I eat? Nothing. You are given nothing. Most players don't even know that you can jump in this game. Remember Mario? He did that several years ago, and he did it a lot. A whole lot. And it took one button. Bloodborne doesn't give a shit about Mario. So what does all of this have to do with an old Atari game? Well, maybe nothing. But I believe the fulcrum between these two seemingly opposing games lies with the Easter egg. Now, I'm sure we both know what an Easter egg is, but for the sake of clarity, I'm referring to an intentional inside joke or a hidden message in a piece of media. Not quite as impossibly hidden as the appeal of Juno, but still pretty hidden. Seriously, I don't understand the appeal of that movie at all. Does anybody here? Fake person over there that I'm pointing to that doesn't exist? You do? You like Juno? Alright. I thought I respected you. Back in 1979, Atari game developer Warren Robinett was fed up with the lack of recognition game developers received for their creations. It was a common practice in those days for many developers to consider video games as a simple commodity, not as a work of art like we do today. In Robinett's words, Atari treated us badly. No royalties, no name on the box, no external recognition, being told that we were easily replaceable. They disrespected us. So, he decided to sneak some recognition into his game Adventure. Robinett programmed a flashing marquee of the phrase created by Warren Robinett that was accessible only by a very specific series of events in the game, a series of events that normal players, and perhaps more importantly the Atari higher-ups, would never naturally replicate, thereby keeping it hidden. I saw it as my signature, like what a painter puts at the bottom of a painting, Robinett says. My model was the hidden messages that were supposedly present in Beatles records played backwards back in the late 1960s. Messages like, I buried Paul. The created by Warren Robinett screen is believed to be maybe not the first Easter egg in a game, but definitely the first discovered Easter egg in a game. And discovery is important here. The following year, in 1980, someone found the Easter egg. Atari received a letter from a 15-year-old boy from Salt Lake City, Utah, detailing his discovery of the Warren Robinett screen. While Robinett should be given due credit for creating this Easter egg, and Adam Clayton credit for opening a line of conversation between developer and player, I actually believe Atari is responsible for building this connection into a proper dialogue. Though the Atari management definitely weren't happy with Robinett's sneakiness, Steve Wright, the lead designer at Atari at the time, responded positively. No, this is great. It's an Easter egg in the game, and the kids love finding it. We should encourage all of the game programmers to add Easter eggs to all their games. It then became an actual development policy at Atari to include Easter eggs in future games. And as Jack Yarwood of Paste Magazine says, that decision was also responsible for transforming the inclusion of Easter eggs from a rebellious act into a way of enhancing the experience for the player at home. And the practice never stopped. Samus's ship in Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, Chris Houlihan's secret room in The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, LMD initials in the Donkey Kong Atari port, Zelda in Call of Duty Ghosts, Conan O'Brien and Andy Richter in Halo 4, Breaking Bad and Dead Rising 3, Super Mario Bros. And Dying Light, the Hidden Roster in NBA Jam Tournament Edition, Candy Crush and Doom, and on and on and on and on. Individual games now have dozens of Easter eggs. Players love finding them, players love discussing them, and developers love including them. I argue that the introduction of Easter eggs is what set in motion the idea of a conversation between developer and player. As word of these Easter eggs spread from schoolyard to internet forums and later to YouTube videos, obviously, developers perpetuated this excitement further by incorporating fan requests into games. A good example is Carmack, who originally appeared in Mortal Kombat 3 because players who happened upon the Mortal Kombat audit screen assumed Carmack was a reference to a hidden character. In reality, it was simply a shorthand for error macro. But the developers thought it was fun, so they decided to include Carmack in a future game. That's a conversation, and that's important. So all of what came from this set in motion a trend which is currently realized to its extreme with truly player-developer dependent experiences like this. Let me know in the comments below how you feel Easter eggs have impacted gaming. Am I right at all? Am I wrong? Definitely let me know. I want this to be a conversation. Thanks for watching. Give this video a quick like if you got any enjoyment out of it, and subscribe while you're at it. I'd appreciate that. I make videos much like this one in addition to Let's Plays and maybe a few reviews here and there. If you go far enough back on my channel, you'll find a lot of book-related videos. I'm a reader. I like reading. Also, I'm trying something different with this video. In the description below, I've linked to a Google Doc that contains the script for this video, along with my notes and my sources and things like that. I figure some of you may appreciate a glimpse into the process of making one of these videos. Oh, and one more quick aside. Adam Clayton, the 15-year-old boy from Salt Lake City, Utah, he would later grow up to become a programmer himself and actually design games for Atari consoles. kind of interesting how that works. Thank you again so much for watching, and happy hunting for Easter eggs. Not people or animals.